As the hitting intensifies, it's 1-0 Montreal. On a power play for another 50 seconds. Richards trying to scoot in there alone. Halak way out of the net. It pinballs to the crease. Score! Mike Richards!
The Flyer captain is announcing his presence as the alpha male early in this one. Big hit. Sets up that cranker from Coburn, the defenseman joining the attack. They win a puck deep in their own zone. Hammerlick and the goaltender Halak collide. Oh, did they ever. And it's a tap in for Richards.
Flyers Nitty Gritty presents the O&B Puckcast, episode number 100. Wow. I'm your host, Isaiah. 100 episodes. I know, last one that we talked about, the episode number, was 98, but the special we did with Jamie Basco from FlyersNittyGritty.com was unofficially 99, but we're up at episode 100, and Chef, my partner here, has been with me for most of them. Chef, when you weren't on a drunken binge back in the chef days.
Yeah, back in the chef days.
Yeah, you've been with me from the very beginning, and
yeah.
I'll tell you, man, it's really something else. That's a milestone, and another milestone is we're ready to start the Flyer season. As we are here with a Flyer season preview, we're going to be joined by Kevin Durso of 97.3 ESPN. Coming up not too long from now. And also we're here, of course, as always, with the great Dan Silver.
Man, I'm excited for tomorrow. It's going to be great. And 100 episodes, man, you guys should be proud of that. That is very incredible. It takes a lot of dedication to keep, something going for that long. And it's a real credit to both of you.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate it. Yeah. And, we've had some inspiration along the way, and 100 episodes, a big advantage we have. We've got all kinds of range of opinions. Then, I've been following the team 50 plus years, Chef 40, and Dan, that puts you right at 30. So nice range there, I think we got. Moving along, there's too much excitement to dwell on that, but before we go, just a reminder that FlyersNittyGritty.com and the O&B Puckcast is brought to you by Jim South Street, 400 South Street, Steaks and Hoagies. 4 decades of some of the best steaks and hoagies you'd ever want, and certainly that cheesesteak has got to be, with or without, on your bucket list. So make sure you head on over to Jim South Street, 400 South Street. If you're in the area, can't make it, they work with DoorDash, so they have it delivered to your door, and you will love it. Make sure you check out Jim South Street, 400 South Street. And gents, with that, when the Flyers announced their roster, they have a taxi squad, and breaking news that I was not aware of, Dan, that some of these OHL players who don't know if they're going to have a season, like Mason Millman, Zayd Wisdom, Tyson Forster, are going to be eligible to play in the AHL. What say you?
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, we'll get to keep an eye on those guys. I thought it was great that they invited them to camp. And, obviously none of those guys are particularly close to being NHL ready, but getting some experience in the AHL will be great. And I didn't see this, but I'm assuming that this will not burn off a year of their entry-level contracts, that there's some kind of exemption being made for guys who can't play in the OHL, so they're playing in the AHL. I would think so, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe that's something we could check with Kevin about. Chef, the Flyers and the Bruins, it's just been confirmed officially by the NHL, are going to play an outdoor game in Lake Tahoe on February the 21st at 3 p.m. And I know Pierre-Edouard Bellemare was upset in that they will not be playing actually on the lake. It actually thinks it's going to be on a golf course or something that they're building.
It's going to be on the 16th green or 18th green of the golf of the golf course. So 18th hole, I think.
Yeah, and
18th. Yeah, I think it's a fairway because the green would be way too small. So it's probably. Oh yeah, I'm just seeing it now. Yeah, 18th fairway of the course. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We'll just check what what driver they're using. If they're going to 3 or 4 putt, we'll be able to tell what green they're on. But gents, the scrimmages are over, and the choices have been made. The lines are set. But we're going to go through the lines with Kevin. But Dan, what are your impressions when you saw some of the reports from camp and see how it manifested in the scrimmage game, and maybe some of the surprises that came out of that game? Because I'll tell you, even if it was just a silly little scrimmage, not even an exhibition game, it was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, it was great. And I think that, the biggest story in camp has got to be Nolan Patrick. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that we all probably thought he was healthy coming into camp, but I think we didn't know if he'd look rusty. And he was arguably the best player in camp. I mean, from all reports, he was fantastic. That carried over to the scrimmage. Him and Voracek and JVR looked really good. And he's just a huge key for the Flyers this season, because if he can stay healthy, like, I get it, everyone's really excited about how he looks, and I'm excited too, but you still need to see him stay healthy. If he can stay healthy, the Flyers are going to have 3 unbelievable lines with Lindblom, Couturier, and Konechny, Giroux, Hayes, and Farabee. And that line, the Giroux, Hayes, Farabee line, showed absolutely great chemistry in the scrimmage. I mean, fantastic. And if Farabee can have a breakout year, it'll be huge. And then JVR, Patrick, and Voracek look good. And then you've got a fourth line of Raffle Lawton and Nicholas Aubé-Kubel, which is going to just terrorize other teams as a fourth line. And I do want to say, I'm a big fan of Morgan Frost. Everyone's been talking about him because yesterday people just assumed he wasn't making the team because of how the lines were looking. But I thought it was a really nice surprise today that Morgan Frost did make the team. It's a big deal for that young man. He makes the team, and he's the 13th forward. And I'm just happy for him because, he's I think he gets some slack from Flyers fans. I think he's a very talented player. So I was happy that he made it as the 13th forward over guys like Bunneman and Terensky, who are on the taxi squad.
Yeah, the taxi squad includes Sam Morin, who deserves a lot of credit for making that level and making a shift to a new position and not looking. I don't want to damn him with faint praise. He didn't look bad out there. I'll just put it that way. Tanner Lashinsky, who probably could have been that 13th forward, or maybe even took a spot. I'm not really sure. But yeah, probably been a 13th forward, perhaps. But he has a core muscle injury. But he should be ready soon enough in a couple weeks. Bunneman, who you mentioned, Andy Andrioff, a veteran who can step in and play a lot of different roles, and of course Carson Twarynski. And Chef, before I get to you, I just mentioned I don't want to gloss over Nolan Patrick. Nolan Patrick has the best offensive skill set of any of our centers. I mean, just best shot. I think he's as good at Couturier as a passer. He's a horse. He's a really big young man. It gives them 3 really tall, long centers in this division, which is really going to come in handy. And if he can stay healthy, it's a big deal, because then you talk about how eventually he could be worked into the power play. It's just, to me, like I mentioned on previous shows, he is the X factor that determines whether the Flyers are a nice team that definitely should make the playoffs, but might not make a lot of noise, and a team that really could be looking, if they add a defenseman at the trade deadline or whenever, that could be looking at a serious cup contender. Chef, you go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Just to piggyback what Dan said about the line with him, JVR, and Jake. I mean, wow, what a story that would be for all 3 of those lines to catch their groove with each other. I mean, just think. I mean, half the fan base is written off Jake to go somewhere. The other half hates JVR. And, you got another large segment that didn't think that, Nolan Patrick was even going to come back. Now, how about that line lighting it up and being your third line? That would be amazing. I would love to see that. I think that would be incredible. I think that's what a good underlying story. I liked Morgan Frost. I thought he had a pretty good camp. And, maybe one of the best camps of all the players coming there. Definitely put in the work. The game, he had a pretty decent scrimmage game. My only concern is now I want him playing. I don't want him sitting. I don't want him sitting on the bench being the extra guy or a part of the taxi squad. I would much rather have him go down and play some games and with the knowledge that, hey, you're going to work your way into this lineup. That's my only fear. I don't want him I don't want all that hard work and all that determination, just to sit on a bench. But yeah, I mean, overall, I'm very excited.
Yeah, I mean, they could call that. Just one thing, Dan. I'll turn it over. I was just going to say you could call that Patrick Voracek JVR line the blocked on Twitter line.
True.
Because everybody's had a bitch about each one of them at one given time. Dan,
I'm blocked by Jake.
Yeah, I was. Me too. I actually got blocked by Jake because I was at a preseason game, and he had a 2-on-1. And I think he overpassed. He passed it when he took taking the shot. And I tweeted something like, "Man, Jake, you should shoot that." And I was blocked after the game. So, but I think with Frost, the AHL season doesn't start until February 5th or so. So yeah. I'm guessing that the plan is that there's nowhere else for these guys to play right now. So my guess would be that if the Flyers are fully healthy, by when the AHL season starts, that they will send Frost down to get some playing time. But I think that they kind of wanted to send him a message that, hey, we noticed that you worked on some things and that you played well. And so putting him on that 23-man roster, I think is kind of a big deal just from them showing him the kind of confidence they have. But I do think that, if there's no space for him to play come AHL season, they'll probably send him back down.
Yeah, I agree totally, because they wanted him to work out, strengthen his core, and on the ice, pay more attention to the defensive side of the game, being more of a 200-foot player, and he obviously complied with that. So I agree, Dan, definitely a reward for that. It's symbolic probably by the time the AHL begins, but certainly not insignificant. Chef?
Also, just a note about Nolan Patrick. I don't know if anybody else noticed. Did he put on some weight? I mean, he looks a lot thicker. Like we always talked about the young guys putting on and developing into their bodies, like Farabee last year, being a little small, but seemed he got a little bit bigger. It seemed there's a huge noticeable difference to me, or is it the fact that I haven't seen Nolan Patrick on skates in like a year? But he did look like he was bigger and in really good shape.
Well, I mean, he's always been a big kid, and with another year of maturity, you're going to get rid of some of that baby fat. He's going to be more chiseled. And, of course, he had to take some time off because if you train too intensely, you definitely can bring on a headache. That could be a trigger. Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I thought Patrick kind of stepped in right after he was drafted as an 18-year-old and kind of already looked like he had that NHL body. So I think that, just the energy that he brought and his level of play is just so exciting.
Yeah, I mean, let's get into some of the details of why we're excited about what he did and some of the other players. I think he wasn't just gliding out there. He was making stuff happen. He was stripping the puck away from the defenseman. He was making small, high IQ passes in the zone. He was noticeable, I think, midway through the first period on. Of course, we were looking at him right away, but they were really dominant. And you think about Patrick is not a reluctant shooter like probably the other two centers, although I think Hayes is kind of 50-50. And JVR is going to be someone who can clean up the garbage and make a nifty pass because he's another really good vision kind of player. So I think potentially that could really be a great thing. But, to piggyback something Dan said, Chef, Farabee is what? He's about maybe like 10, 12 pounds heavier this year. Looked a little faster, a little more sure of himself. He's made a nice progression. And if you have Giroux able to play well away from Couturier, that's a big deal because then it lets Lindblom do his thing, and then you have two really defensively responsible players with Konechny, and that's probably a good thing. And Farabee has a very mature game. Everything just kind of dovetails as things sit right now. Now, we may have a come to Jesus moment after the next two games versus the Penguins, but right now, things are sitting pretty.
Yeah, things look good. I mean, I think Dan, when he tweeted it out, the lines, what was the terminology used, Dan? Ferocious or furious?
I don't know. Probably I said a lot of things. I mean, it's scary good, and
yeah,
they look great. And Farabee, I'm a huge Farabee fan. I had him as the number one Flyers prospect over Frost a couple of years ago when a lot of people had Frost over him, and I love both of them. But I know someone who's close to the Farabee family, and a couple of years ago he said to me, it might have been last year, that Joel's brothers are actually like more gifted athletically than he is. But the difference is that he has always had this insane work ethic and drive to be the absolute best. And people don't really talk about it, but I think he's got that drive like Claude Giroux does to like just be a great player. And I think Farabee's going to surprise a lot of people. I think he has more upside than a lot of people think. I mean, I think he could become a very, very good NHL player. Almost like a poor man's Jonathan Toews type, not as good, but I really like Farabee. He's put on some muscle. I just think he's a really good hockey player. And, I was listening to the, he changed his number to 86 this year, and people were wondering why. And I was listening to the Broad Street Hockey Podcast, which is another good one out there. And Charlie O'Connor with The Athletic mentioned that his theory, which he wants to believe, is that, Jack Hughes is 86 for the Devils, and that Hughes and Farabee were in the same draft, and also that they were on the same U.S. hockey team, and that, that Farabee has this drive to be like better than Jack Hughes. So he's like, you know what, I'm going to take Hughes' number and I'm going to prove that I'm better than him. So I kind of like that. It kind of fits with Farabee. And so he's one of my favorite guys to watch play. And I really hope that line with Hayes and Giroux just kills it from the start.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, all across all the lines, when you tweeted out and I looked at the lines and then I saw the game and I went, wow. If all these guys are up on their skates and having a good game, I'm not going to say exceptional, but it's a good game, they can really drive play. I mean, like like we haven't seen in probably 10 years. They can drive play, and then that fourth line gets on the ice and just irritates the hell out of you. I mean, just the chirping alone from Scott Lawton and Knack. Now Knack picking it up like he did last year. I just think that they have the ability. I mean, that line can get out there, get under your skin, you take a stupid penalty, and then here comes that power play unit that we saw on scrimmage night. And wow, did that look like they actually made passes and shot the puck. So I was pleasantly surprised by all that. So I can't wait. I can't wait to see the line combinations and how they fare against opposing teams. But I really do like what I see so far.
Yeah, it should be fun. The only thing for me, and we've said this before, you take Patrick out of that lineup, and it reminds me of a Drano commercial. It's just that third line center hole, and this is why it's so important for Frost to get time. But Dan, I totally agree with you. He should be up with the team, should be skating, practicing, and again, learning more about being a pro until the AHL option is there. And if they have an injury, they have a skilled forward that can play in their top nine, and that's a good thing. But we got to talk about the defense too, because we're going to get into power play and things like that with Kevin, perhaps. We noticed that Shane Gostisbehere is unfit to play, and I think Wade Allison's also in that category, I believe. Is that the case? I believe.
Allison day-to-day, it says.
Day-to-day, okay.
I think Allison...
Lower body injury.
Allison left in the middle of a practice, and I think that it was something injury related.
Mm-hmm.
Shane Gostisbehere, that's the one that is perplexing to me. He started off camp and they had him on the top pair with Ivan Provorov. And I was excited because I'm a fan of his and I'd love to see him get another shot. And then whatever day it was, Friday or Saturday, where he was just not at practice and listed as unfit to play. And we don't know if it's COVID related or injury related. I mean, I hope it's COVID related and obviously that he's healthy.
Right.
But you just don't know because they're not giving out any information. They're saying that maybe they'll have more information tomorrow about it because I guess when the actual season starts, teams do have to disclose some info. But it does kind of throw a monkey wrench in the defense a little bit. And so, as excited as we are about the forwards, at least for me, it's a little less excitement about the defense because now you've got Justin Braun on the top pair with Ivan Provorov. And look, Braun's a decent defenseman, but he's getting older, and I think his play is going to be declining. And Phil Myers, who probably is the best option to play with Provorov, is back on the second pair with Travis Sanheim. And I think that that's probably because they want some continuity somewhere. They don't want to break up all the defense pairs because your third pair is Robert Haig and Eric Gustafsson. So you've got, a guy who's hasn't played on the team at all in Gustafsson paired with Haig, and now Braun paired with Provorov. So I think they, wanted to keep Myers with Sanheim. But there are definitely some question marks about, the defense core of this team, I would say.
Yeah. And before, Chef, I'll get you in a second. The thing about Myers is I think he didn't have a whole season of consistency. And I agree with you. I think the continuity coming out of the gate is definitely a factor. But I also think they want to spoon feed him more responsibility. They want to see if he can handle PK minutes, how well he does on that unit, and to see if he can be molded by the end of the season into that replacement for Matt Niskanen with relative deficits and positives to that player, and that might shape what seems to be inevitable a trade for another defenseman. Are they going to need someone where they're just going to have to fill in and backfill a spot, or are they going to have to go bigger because this team looks like they could do some really good things, and you don't want to pass up an opportunity to make the type of acquisition that could put you over the top. The Chef?
Yeah, when they announced during the game that Braun was playing with Provy, I double taked at the TV. I thought actually rewound it and I said, wait, did he really just say that? I thought it was at the least fascinating. By all means, I understand the keeping of Myers and Sanheim together. They were by far the best defensive pairing of the night. But I was quite shocked. I mean, in that situation, it wasn't necessarily bad. Braun didn't look absolutely out of place or bad. It was just, I guess, surprising because that's not what you thought you were going to get on the first pair, unless they're thinking, and this could be it, that veteran presence that Provy got from Niskanen, they're hoping maybe Braun can rub off on him, and maybe that lets him feel free to do what he's got to do, knowing that he's got a more stay-at-home guy in Braun. I don't know. Maybe. Yeah,
I mean, to me, Braun on the first pair is like a living, breathing oops emoji, on Twitter. And it's just, you're gritting your teeth and hoping it's going to work out. But frankly, I don't think Braun would have been here had Niskanen not retired. The Flyers probably would have moved on. That's not a slight on Justin Braun. I think it's a fair judgment of the situation. But listen, he'll do a good job on the penalty kill. I think they're going to have a rotating group of defensemen with Provy, and hopefully they can settle on somebody. But to me, some type of addition is inevitable. And Dan, I'm going to leave you with the last comment before we get on with Kevin Durso.
Yeah, I think you're right. Here's the thing: if Nolan Patrick is able to stay healthy, and let's say the rest of the forwards stay relatively healthy, I think that they're going to have some salary cap space, and they're not going to have to add a forward, so they will be able to potentially add a defenseman at the trade deadline if they want, who could take some of those minutes. And I'm hoping that Shane Gostisbehere is healthy and can get back out there, because I do think that he could be good on that first pair. I am concerned about that first pair with Provorov and Braun. It's just kind of I'm just not a huge fan of Braun. So, that is going to be something worth watching. But the forwards are incredible, and Carter Hart is incredible, and they've got some pretty damn good defensemen. But that, on that top pair, just where some question marks are. So, that's where the question mark is. But I think they've got a very good hockey team.
Yeah. And gents, we're going to leave it there because we're going to speak with Kevin Durso of 97.3 ESPN, and he will be joining us directly. And we are joined by Flyers insider for 97.3 ESPN in South Jersey. His name is Kevin Durso. How you doing, man?
Doing great, guys. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. I've noticed your stuff on the 97.3 ESPN.com and heard you on with guys like Mike Gill and all that. I always thought you really did a good job. So it's such a pleasure to have you on with our Flyers season preview. What's it's been a strange year for everybody, but here we are. We're on the precipice of the Flyers opener, a 56-game season that's going to be very exciting with the old classic NHL style where you only play a given number of teams several times and the rivalries will develop. So what's your impression of how the NHL is doing this, and also your initial impressions of how the Flyers are put together this season?
Well, I think any hockey is good hockey. So the fact that we're getting this season is great. I love the way that the NHL handled everything over the summer with the playoff and the bubble and everything like that. The fact that they were able to do that with no hiccups in the bubble was great. So I certainly go into this with a lot of confidence that they can pull this off to some similar effect. I'm sure that there will be moments where there are teams that have to deal with some things with COVID, and that's understandable, but I don't see any reason why we can't get through a 56-game season. I'm a fan of the realignment, too. I think it brings out the rivalries, which is great. The fact that we're starting this season with Flyers-Penguins twice, and you're going to get a lot more of that as the season goes on. 7 different teams, 8 times you're going to play them. It's exciting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this is like original 6 stuff. You're really going to hate these teams, and it's almost like having a 7-game series spread out over several teams in a very compacted schedule. The Flyers seem to have a tremendous amount of forward depth as long as certain players stay healthy, and they look terrific. We're really excited about that. What do you see with this team in that regard?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head to start with. The forward depth is just outstanding. I mean, the lines that they've rolled out so far, and I assume, I'm taking an assumption here, this is the way it's going to look on that Wednesday night opener. To put Oscar Lindblom back on your top line is adding a huge player right there. We saw the potential he has in that small sample from last season before his diagnosis, and now his recovery has come complete. He's going to be back, and to put him alongside of Sean Couturier and Travis Konechny is just an excellent place for him. Joel Farabee on the second line, adding some weight over the offseason, getting stronger, looking physically stronger in that scrimmage and throughout camp. To put him with Claude Giroux and Kevin Hayes on the second line. And then what more can you say about the third line here with Nolan Patrick coming back after the near 2-year layoff for him, going through his recovery process? To put him back and put him in between James Van Riemsdyk and Jake Voracek, and to then go into things further and have Michael Raffl, Scott Lawton, Nick Aube-Kubel on your fourth line. That's your fourth line. That's incredible depth. And, having Morgan Frost waiting right behind is not a bad option either. So they've got great forward depth. Defensively, they look pretty solid too, honestly. I mean, everybody knows what to expect from Ivan Provorov at this point, I would say. And then to keep that Travis Sanheim, Phil Myers pairing together, it's going to be interesting to see how that continues to develop. They still have to find a way to fill that void of Matt Niskanen, and they're going to have to experiment with that over the year, whether it's Justin Braun, who's probably going to be there on Wednesday, or some of the other guys. Eric Gustafsson might get a look there. Maybe Shane Gostisbehere gets a chance once he's back in the lineup. But for the most part, they have a really good, solid group of guys, and a lot of them are familiar to everybody. These are guys who were playing together last year and who have some familiarity, and hopefully that pays off instead of trying to put it all together really early, because the start is so important to a shortened season.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Chef?
Well, I was just going to say, you just touched on it. This is almost reminiscent of like the college schedules where every game means so much. But more importantly, what do you think is the realistic outcome of this team? I mean, we had just hashed it about. We're looking like a playoff team. But as Isaiah said earlier, it's funny, everything you said, it's like you were on our show for the last half an hour. So, but Isaiah said that, depending on how Nolan Patrick rolls and that third line of all the guys that were, I guess the misfit line, all these guys together, if they can pull that out, I mean, what do you think realistically is possible?
It's tough to say this particular year because the schedule is so different, and competing against the same teams over and over again is going to create some really stiff competition here. But I don't doubt what Alain Vigneault has said throughout camp, and he really kind of laid the hammer down and set the stage for what the season should be. And he said it's not negotiable. Making the playoffs has to happen. And I agree with that. I don't think you can be out of the playoffs. I think that not only getting into the playoffs, but at least winning one round in the playoffs should be an expectation. And it's going to be tricky from there because you might get an interesting first round matchup because it's all interdivision still at that point. The second round is still within the division. So you're going to continue to play those same teams, and you just could get a matchup that doesn't work well for you. We watched in the playoffs last year how the Islanders just seemed to have the Flyers number throughout the year. It wasn't just a playoff series. It was the regular season too. And the Flyers took them to 7 games, and that's impressive. But that could be a situation that you don't want to be in the playoffs. And if that's your first round matchup, it could lead to some trouble. So it's hard to put expectations on the playoffs itself, but I definitely think making the playoffs is a fair expectation for sure.
Yeah. Dan?
So I'm interested in what are your thoughts on2-part question. The first would be, what Flyers player are you kind of expecting to exceed expectations the most? And then where do you think there might be some danger in a guy who might take a step back from last year?
Well, I think a guy who I would like to see really take a big step, and I'm trying not to put it on guys who I think expectations should be lowered on. Like Nolan Patrick being back is great, but I don't want to give too high expectations for him after being, especially from a production standpoint, after being out for that long. So a guy I think should take a big step is Joel Farabee. I think that now that he's added some size, he's going to be playing consistently alongside some skilled players, should get some power play time. I think that he's going to take a huge step this year, and that could be a real point for adding some offensive production, because I think he has the chops for it, and to get him a full season in that regard, I think could be a big thing. I think a guy who you might have to watch for some form of possible regression, or a guy who you may have to bring into question with, is probably a guy like Jake Voracek, honestly. I thought he had a really good season last year, but to hear Alain Vigneault keep kind of pushing on him and trying to say there's a little bit more that can be done there and things like that, I just wonder if there's going to be too many games where we sit there and say it's inconsistent, or it didn't look like he showed up as much, or that line wasn't going. So, that line looked really good in the scrimmage, but it's about more than the scrimmage at this point. It's about consistently putting it together against these divisional teams. And that's a guy who I think is going to get a lot of the attention if this team isn't going forward, because people do expect a certain amount of production and a certain level of play from Jake Voracek as a guy who's been here for a long time. And I could see that going either way.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting. You've got, with Nolan Patrick, you've got probably the two forwards who fans like to ridicule the most. I mean, JVR's been kind of, a guy that Flyers fans really like to harp on, that, he doesn't score big goals, and sometimes he doesn't look like he's expending effort out there, and kind of some of the same criticism people have of Voracek. So sticking both of those guys on the quote unquote third line with Patrick it could, I think it has a potential to be like really good, but I also think it has the potential to kind of go south.
Yeah. And I think what we're going to see here too is that, this is the position that everybody said that we talked about that Nolan Patrick was going to play last year, that by putting him on the third line, it should open up some opportunities and possibly open up for him to get some more scoring chances and to be in a position to produce a lot more than he was in those first 2 seasons of his career. And this could be certainly be an opportunity, because I do think that Jake Voracek can be a playmaker for him and help set him up in certain areas. I'd like to see what Patrick has in his skill set at that spot. JVR can do some of those things too, and he can be a finisher. So hopefully that helps, especially if they get some favorable matchups. But that's also, I think, the line that has the potential to be the most frustrating as well, just because there's going to be a curve involved with Patrick, because he's playing in game action for the first time in nearly 2 years. And don't get me wrong, he looked great in that scrimmage, but it's going to take on a whole new level when they start playing for real. And then the other two are, like you guys said, a pairing of forwards that people just seem to go either way on. They're either really rolling at the right time and people are fine with them, or they're the subject of a lot of ridicule.
Yeah. And with that matchup that they have, like you're saying, that's a really big deal. Kevin, There are some people that have some questions about the defense, even though there's a lot of depth there. You wonder if it's the level of depth that they need. The Niskanen retirement really seemed to catch them off guard. And it's tough to find a player who has the ability to replace the hard quality minutes that Niskanen played. And I have a feeling that's going to rear its ugly head because, no team's perfect. They all have their stress points. And I think this is one for the Flyers.
Yeah, it's certainly the biggest question mark they have because I don't really look at any other position. I think the forward depth, as we just talked about, has a lot of valuable points here and has a lot of positives. And obviously, the goaltending isn't a question going into this year. So the defense is really the big question mark. And filling that void is the big question mark. They're going to give it a go with Justin Braun at the beginning. I don't know quite how to feel about that, to be honest, because I just don't see Braun being the long-term solution. He might be a good short-term option for now. Maybe you eventually see how one of these other guys comes into play. It could be Erik Gustafsson. It could be Shane Gostisbehere. And I don't know if that's going to be the complete answer to the solution. I kind of, from the beginning, my speculation was that Phil Myers was going to be the guy who just more naturally assumed the role, and maybe with time he will. But for now, I think that Braun's going to be the guy, and I don't think that Braun is a straight-up natural replacement for Niskanen from a minute standpoint. Even though they're both right-handed defensemen and play in the same position, I don't think it is from a minute standpoint or from an ability standpoint.
Yeah. Chef?
Yeah, I was just thinking, since you did bring up Ghost, now the big question is, if he comes back and he really does make an impact, and let's say, we've seen him in practice that he's been up in that top position, is he still, in your opinion, is he still the trade bait that they're looking for? Or is it somebody they hold on through the off season and maybe make a move right around draft time?
I think it's going to be hard to move him during the year just because the contract is so hard to move. And I do think he's getting one last chance to prove he can be part of this team moving forward. I don't think you're going to see anything really involved with him in terms of movement. I think he's part of the plan moving forward for now this season. Where he's going to play, I don't know. I mean, the fact that he's already not available for that first game and we just don't know a reason yet, it kind of speaks volumes in and of itself, because the hope would probably have been to see if he could just jump right back into the lineup and possibly contribute right away, and maybe that would provide some confidence, not just for himself, but for a lot of people who watch and have those questions about his future, and show that he can still fit in with this team and be part of this team's plan. But as the longer he sits out, the harder it's going to be. And right now, that's why they're moving forward with the grouping that they are. That's why Justin Braun's up in that top spot. It's why Erik Gustafsson's playing alongside Robert Hägg, and that could be an interesting pair. That's a pair that could actually add some dynamic play to it, because Gustafsson's got the ability to move the puck well, and he's got the ability to be an offensive guy at times. And I'm interested to see what he brings, because we haven't really heard a ton about him through camp, and it's being that it was a short camp anyway. So to see him in a few games and to see what he brings would be interesting. But in terms of what Gostisbehere can bring, the first thing he's got to do is get into the lineup, and right now he's not able to do that. So he needs to get back in the lineup first, and then we'll kind of see where it goes from there.
Yeah. Dan?
So I want to look at that 13th forward spot, because this has been something that Flyers fans have been talking about the last few days on Twitter a lot. And I'm a big fan of Morgan Frost, but I would say that I didn't necessarily expect him to get that 13th spot. I was hoping he would. I thought they might go with someone like a Bunneman or a Torensky, who got a little bit more NHL games in last year, I believe. But I was really happy to see Frost get it. I was excited to see the quotes from AV and Fletcher about how, they thought that Frost worked on what they had told him he needed to work on. And I actually thought he was pretty good during the scrimmage. Were you surprised at all that he got that 13th spot over Bunneman or Torensky? And can you kind of talk a little bit about him in camp and what you've seen?
I'm not surprised he got the spot, because I do think he was starting to turn heads last year. And I think that at some point in time, he's going to need to get that shot. So I think that that's fair for him. And he's looked good throughout, and he seems to be a guy who has learned from those things that they told him to work on. Like you guys said, that he did exactly what they've asked of him to this point, and he continues to grow. I think the concerning part of him being in the 13th spot is just that it's the 13th spot. And I think the ideal thing would be for him to be playing. And I think in a perfect situation for him, if Nolan Patrick was still a question mark, then that's probably his spot on the roster, in the lineup, I should say. And he's not the 13th guy. But, for now, I think I'd like him to be there, because I just don't know how consistently any of these guys in any lineup are going to be. It's because games are so close together. any of these guys could potentially be out the very next night just to stay healthy, to be rested, for whatever reason. And having that guy be, somebody like Morgan Frost be the guy who you can insert into the lineup that quickly is a good benefit for your team. It adds to the depth. So that's why I like him in that spot. I just don't know how long it's going to last if he's not getting into games, because one thing I think we've learned from Alain Vigneault is that when this team is going really successfully and winning a lot of games, if things are going well, then he's not going to make a ton of changes. So that's not a spot that you want Frost to be trapped in for too long. But early on, I think when rotation is probably going to be likely and he'll get his shot at some point, then I think that putting him there and having him available right from the start is a good option.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about how if the AHL was starting tomorrow, that maybe it'd be different, and maybe Frost would be down there, and that maybe if everyone's healthy and the lineup is plugging along when the AHL starts, maybe he'll get sent down. But for now, it's a good spot for him. And one just technical question we were talking about earlier, and you might or might not know the answer to this, but it sounds like some of the OHL guys like Millman and Wisdom and Forster are going to be playing with the Phantoms if the OHL hasn't started yet. I'm assuming that doesn't burn off a year of their ELC. Do you know about that?
I don't know for sure, but I don't believe it does. No, because I think it's a unique situation. So I assume that it doesn't affect them in any way, and that this is a kind of like a loan almost, that instead of loaning them back to the junior team and saying that they're sent there, that they're actually on loan from the junior team for now until they start playing. I assume that's the case, but nonetheless, I think that's actually, I thought it was a great move to have those guys in camp, because it just gives them a shot to get on the ice and to potentially play. And I think it'd be great if the OHL continues to delay and continues to be, not starting up at the present time. Then to have them in the AHL and get some pro experience right away could be huge for their development, because I think they need to play more than just sit out.
Yeah, absolutely. Kevin, just wanted to also touch on another area that was problematic, particularly in the bubble, and that's the power play. Now, we know lines and power play units are going to shift according to the results. And like you said earlier, when things are going well, Navy's going to stick with it. If not, he's going to make changes. But right now, that first power play has Provorov with Giroux, Hayes, Couturier, and TK. And the second unit's going to have Farabee, JVR, Patrick, Voracek, and Gustafson, who hopefully can add some elements there. One thing I noticed in the scrimmage, and apparently they've been working on in the practices, and you can comment, they seem to be making smaller plays in tight around the net, more as much north-south and maybe a little bit less east-west. Could you speak further to some of the schematic changes that you think that they're going to employ?
I think that's one of them for sure, that they're trying to be as quick as possible with moving the puck around. And I think it has to do with, like you said, I think it has to do with less east-west movement, trying to go cross ice and trying to just focus on funneling pucks to the net. And I think one of the things I've liked that I've seen specifically from the first unit is Travis Konechny down low. I think that that's a good place for him, actually. I think as much as I like his shot, I think that him being down low is a great place for him, because he's got that gritty nature about him that bodes well for being in front of the net. Even though he's a small guy, he's got that gritty nature that will earn some space. And if he's down there with somebody else too, because I think they've put JVR down there a couple of times too, or both one at each side of the net. So it's kind of like there's two guys right there on the doorstep and they let the other three cycle around to get the puck to the net. It's a good place to be, because you might score a lot of goals that way by getting rebounds that are right there for you, instead of trying to find the perfect play, get a shot from out high, maybe take that shot from the circle. I think that it's a better way to try to approach this possibly. So I think that's going to be one of the things to watch, is having those two players down there. And I think on the other unit, it's going to be something. Nolan Patrick is one of the guys who would play in that type of a spot. Voracek's going to be one of the guys probably in a shooter spot out at one of the circles. You got Gustafson at the top. So I think there's a lot of ways that they can move this around and try to have all of them involved. And hopefully I'd like to see them not be so stationary either. I think that if they're stationary, it's just going to be easy to predict. And I think that was one of the things that did them in the playoffs, was that it was kind of easy to predict where everything was going. I think if they start to move around a little bit and get guys into better scoring position, that they might be able to get the payoff more often. And I think that's the end goal.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a TK, if he's down in that spot, kind of like a Brendan Gallagher from Montreal, doing that kind of gritty work and, showing that kind of a willingness to go to really tough areas, even though you're a little undersized, and that's another element that should add to his 5-on-5 play.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously I know one of the big topics over the offseason was the fact that Konechny didn't score in the playoffs, and I don't think that there's anything to be worried about there. I think that a guy who scored 24 goals in each of his last 3 seasons in the regular season knows how to score goals, and I think it will come back pretty easily once he's able to get on the board the first time. I don't think there's anything to worry about with him. He'll be a key contributor because the Flyers are going to keep putting him in the spots to contribute. So it's not a concern, and I think he's going to be in a really great position to get a few by just being in front of the net like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I go to you, Chef, just a question. Could you explain to the folks about how the taxi squad works? We mentioned that it had Sam Morin, Tanner Lashinsky, Connor Bunnaman, Andy Andrioff, and Carson Twarynski. But how does that work with waivers and maybe who is it maybe some risk of being claimed or something like that?
Sure. Right now, there's really no risk of anybody being claimed because the Flyers waived everybody who needed to be, and they've all cleared. So everybody who's on there for now is readily available, and I don't believe there's anything that really has to happen in the immediate for them to do anything. I assume that anybody who comes up from the taxi squad is just going to come up because they've already cleared waivers. They're part of the taxi squad roster, and they can just come in and fill in for anybody who's not able to participate in the lineup. Now, once they are off of the active roster and go back to the taxi squad, if they are waiver eligible, they will have to pass through waivers again. So this is going to play into some of the selection. Like you mentioned, Connor Bunnaman and Carson Twarynski as guys who are on that group of taxi squad guys. They're waiver exempt, so they might be the guy who gets the call if they don't expect it to be more than a 1 or 2 game thing. But this is a way for somebody to be actively ready who's participated with the big club for most of this season and is right there ready to go, who can just come up and fill the void, maybe in a more long-term situation if they're a waiver guy. And obviously once they go back down, it would be a much different scenario. I think it'd be the same way for anybody who's already in the minors who cleared. I think you can bring them back up because they've cleared, but now going back down is where the complication comes in. They're going to have to pass through waivers if they're waiver eligible, and it could create some interesting decisions depending on who it is that we're talking about. So it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate that throughout the year, how often they have to turn to it, quite honestly, because, obviously I think the goal would be to not have to turn to it as often as possible and stick with the guys that you have making this roster from day one. So we'll see how it goes, and I think they're in good position with some of the guys that they have on there right now.
Yeah. Were you surprised Sam Morin made it, coming off such a layoff and so many injuries and changing positions?
I'm not surprised he made the taxi squad. I think I would have been more surprised if he was the 13th forward over somebody like Morgan Frost or realistically anybody else they probably could have put into that spot. That would have been surprising to me because that's an indication to me that he would be the next guy in line, and I don't know that he's anywhere close to that. But I'm not surprised they're going to have him continue to be part of the taxi squad and continue to practice with the team or on the opposite ice surface at the practice facility of the other team, and that he can possibly come over to the other side where the rest of the team is, where the 23-man roster is, and participate in that kind of aspect to still get some work as he develops at the new position. But it didn't surprise me that he's part of the taxi squad group, but I would have been shocked if he had made the 23-man roster.
Oh yeah, definitely. Chef?
Okay, with the goalie situation now, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. How important was it now to get knowing that how comfortable Carter Hart was with Moose? How important was the Moose signing now that you see how this condensed schedule is going to play out? I mean, he obviously felt great last year, and he did a really decent job. And for the price frame, I don't think you could have gone out there and got anybody better to fill that spot. But now, even like I said, with that schedule, that's looking like a really good value for this team.
Yeah, I thought it spoke volumes that he took a pay cut from the previous year to re-sign. That says he has confidence in the team. It says he has confidence in Carter Hart to be the guy, and he knows that his role is not the top guy, and that he's okay with that. I'm fine with that, and I really was impressed by him in the scrimmage too. He looked really sharp in that, and I think that bodes well for them going forward to have two guys who they can put some trust in. Obviously, Carter Hart's going to get the bulk of the starts. It's going to be spread out a little bit to keep him fresh for later in the season, but he's going to get the bulk of the starts. And when you need Brian Elliott, you need him to be on point. You need him to be sharp. You need him to be ready. And I think they've got a very reliable guy in goal. And there's other teams out there who probably can't say the same. I think within the division specifically, I think of a team like New Jersey that's out there scrambling now because Corey Crawford retired, and they've got Mackenzie Blackwood, who's kind of a similar situation to Carter Hart in terms of his youth and his lack of NHL experience, since he's only in probably the same thing, his second or third year as well. And now they probably don't have a true backup right now. And the Flyers have Brian Elliott sitting there with all that experience and with all that wisdom to be able to impart on Carter Hart and to be that mentor for him as they go through this shortened season. I think it's great to have both of them. I certainly have enjoyed watching Brian Elliott be part of this team because in this role too, because I think he's been such a help to Carter Hart this whole time. And when he's called upon, he comes in and does a really great job for them.
Follow up then, looking at the rest of the division that they're going to have to play, and you're looking at the goalie tandems in this division. Did Flyers have one of the more solid ones and more reliable, more durable?
Probably, yeah, I would say so. I mean, I don't really get, like I mentioned New Jersey already, and I'll say the same with Buffalo. Those goaltending situations don't impress me at all. Washington's is kind of interesting because Samsonov's a good goaltender. I like him. I just don't know now with the Henrik Lundqvist situation, they have some instability as well. So that's something to watch. Pittsburgh traded away Matt Murray over the offseason, so now they're left with Casey DeSmith as the backup and putting a lot of weight on Tristan Jarry. The Rangers have a good situation, I think, but they're young goaltenders and they're both kind of still developing, so that could get interesting at times. The Islanders lost their really good situation. I mean, they've got a great prospect out there, and that should bode well for them. But at the same time, you're putting a lot on Semyon Varlamov to be a guy who can carry you at times. So I think really the only team that I can find that really competes with what the Flyers have is Boston with Tuukka Rask and Yaroslav Halak. Those are the two teams to me that have the best goaltending in the division right now.
The high-end potential, however, Kevin, of Sorokin on the island and Shesterkin on the Rangers is a little scary, though. I mean, Shesterkin just came out of the gate just smoking everybody.
Oh, for sure. And these guys are going to be good goaltenders. They could be great goaltenders down as the years progress. I think for right now, I don't know that you can expect Sorokin to be what Greiss was for the Islanders last year. And similarly, there's obviously possibilities there that Shesterkin and Georgiev could both have hiccups throughout the year because they're both still young and they don't really have, the Rangers don't have Henrik Lundqvist to lean on anymore either, like they did last year in the playoffs at times when they could go to the veteran instead of trying to so heavily put the weight on to one of those young goaltenders. But they're going to be the goaltending throughout the division could be outstanding for several years to come because Jarry's young, Samsonov's young, you got Sorokin, you've got Shesterkin, you've got all these guys, Mackenzie Blackwood for the Devils, like I said. So these are all guys who could have very long futures, and if they stay in the division, then it's going to be really scary to think about the goaltending that's around the Flyers in that division.
Yeah, we did a whole show with Jason Martinez a couple months ago about what was the Metro Division and how there's a changing of the guard. So, yeah, we're anticipating that. Dan?
Yeah, I mean, even looking beyond the goaltenders, I'm interested in thoughts on, in this division, which teams do you think are on the way up? Which teams are on the way down? Who are the 4 teams that you think are going to make the playoffs out of this division?
Well, there's one obvious one that stands out at the top, and I think the Bruins are probably the team that are going to be at the top of the division. The Flyers are going to be right there. I think they'll make the playoffs. No question about that. I think the Islanders are going to be a team that's in the playoff picture, and then that 4th spot to me comes down to Washington or Pittsburgh. It comes down to Washington or Pittsburgh. I think that the Rangers are growing, but there's still a lot of youth there. I don't know if they're going to get past all these teams that have this kind of depth and this kind of depth with a lot of experience. So I don't know if the Rangers are there yet, but they're growing. I'm interested to see what is of the what the look is for the Sabres and the Devils in this division, because both teams have the potential to take some steps forward and to make show some signs of growth, because the Devils have so many young recent draft picks that should be continuing to grow as they get another year of experience. Buffalo's got the same thing, and not only that, but they go out and they sign a guy like Taylor Hall, so that should make you better right off the bat too. For both teams, I just question their defense, and I think they got a lot of talented forwards, and they got a lot of forwards who could score a lot, but I wonder how their defense is going to hold up, because both sides, the Sabres have Dahlin and Ristolainen, but beyond that, I'm not sure that there's much out there for them that truly impresses me. And then the Devils with Will Butcher's a guy who I really like on their team, but the rest of it kind of, even PK Subban has sometimes taken steps back because of the, well, at least on the defensive side. So I'm wondering how they look both offensively and defensively, and if they can play that thorn in the side role, because I don't think they're going to be challenging for the playoff spots just yet. It really, to me, comes down to that Washington-Pittsburgh situation there and which one stands out more. I tend to lean Washington right now just on paper, but the fact that they're down to one goaltender with a lot of experience and they're trying to fill the void elsewhere as best they can after thinking they had it solved with Lundqvist signed, that's where it gets interesting for me, because keeping your team as fresh as possible is going to mean a lot this year. And I think that the teams that have multiple guys who they feel like they can put in and not really miss a beat, that's the teams that are going to be there at the end. So I think that those are the four that it really comes down to for me: Boston, Philly, the Islanders, and Washington.
I mean, a couple interesting things. The dynamic of the season is going to be interesting because each of the last 2 seasons, Buffalo's come out of the gate like gangbusters. And so part of me is like, man, if Buffalo could come out of the gate like they have the last few seasons and carry it a little bit longer, because they always stink the last 3 months of the season of late, could they surprise some people? But on the other hand, is it going to be a different type of dynamic early on? And, other teams are going to come out stronger relative to the Sabres. So that's going to be something that's going to be interesting for me to watch. The Bruins, to me, are a team that could have some major problems because they lost Krug, they lost Chara, so the defense is down to, is McAvoy the only really good defenseman on that team? Maybe Grizzlechuk. It's pretty good, but I think they've got some questions on the blue line. Rask and Halak are tremendous, but what happened with Rask, leaving the bubble, and obviously he had good reason to do so, but I'm interested in seeing how a 35 and a 33-year-old goaltender kind of manage what's going to be going on with another bubble. And then up front, it seems like, Pasternak and Marchand are both kind of dealing with some injury issues. So I don't know. I feel like everyone is kind of assuming that the Bruins are just going to be the Bruins again, but I see some real risk there between the guys they lost on defense, the injuries to their star players, and the age of the goaltending. So I'm going to be interested to see what they do.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think you've got valid points there with the Bruins, that they'll have questions to deal with, especially now that Chara's not back, and that'll definitely come into play on the blue line. The Sabres point is interesting because, yeah, they've gotten off to some hot starts, but now they're coming back from an even longer layoff than the other teams are in the picture. They haven't played since last March. So trying to put it all together really quickly is going to be a challenge. They've had a little bit of extra training time, obviously, but still, nothing replicates the gameplay. And I wonder how they're going to look in those first games. But otherwise, the interesting thing about this is going to be how consistent teams play. And yes, getting off to a hot start is going to put you in a good spot, and it'll be really interesting to see how this goes and which teams start to stand out from the very beginning, because it takes 2 bad weeks for Boston to set them back a little bit. Maybe 2 good weeks for Buffalo could make them a team that other teams have to challenge going forward to get into the playoffs. That's how quickly things can shift and the tide can shift in this division. So I hope that we see a lot of good competition, and in the Flyers case, I think that hopefully that they get off to that hot start and they look in a lot of areas as good as they seem to look in that scrimmage, because that's going to go a long way against these other teams within the division.
Isaiah, I've got just one more quick question for Kevin. Kevin, were you at the scrimmage yesterday? Were you at the arena or no?
I was not, no.
Okay, got it. I was going to ask because I heard Charlie O'Connor talking about how strange it was. It was his first time there, and how strange he thinks it is being there without fans. And obviously, as fans like me, who was just watching on TV all of last year, it's hard to kind of fathom how odd it is for the players. But it got me thinking about it. I mean, it must be really strange for those guys playing in empty arenas.
Yeah, I'm sure. And, I tweeted out prior to Sunday's game, or Sunday's scrimmage, I should say, that, the media cutbacks have been pretty heavy with everything with COVID and all stuff like that, and the restrictions they have on how many people can get in, things like that. So I'm usually, in years past, I was there at every single game. I'm kind of going to be on more of a rotating basis this year whenever they can kind of get me in there. So hopefully I'm there for the Wednesday opener. If not, I'll be down there sometime down the road, whenever that is. it's definitely going to feel weird. And I've been in the building before, but where it's 3 hours before a game starts, doors aren't open yet. There's no fans in there. You see a very few number of people kind of just walking around that have something to do with the setup or things like that. It's a little bit of an eerie feeling sometimes to be in that empty arena. The lights are down. There's nobody really in there. They're just testing some things out and getting ready. And it's a weird feeling. So I'm sure that for the players, I mean, to an extent, I think some of them are kind of used to it by now because everything else has been without fans, and playing in the bubble certainly helps. But it is your home arena, and you're used to it being a certain way, and it's going to be a different look for sure.
To piggyback what Dan said, I thought it was very interesting. He brought up the Bruins because I was thinking of the Bruins, the Capitals, even maybe not so the Devils so much, but I know there are several teams across the league that have gotten a little bit older, let's say. And you mentioned 35 and 33 with the goalies in Boston. Do you think, and hopefully it rings true because we have Braun on our team, but do you think a shortened season like this will play to advantage of some of these older players that are out there?
I think it's a great thing for some of the younger players who have the motor to keep going. It's why when you guys asked me about the top 4 teams that should make the playoffs out of this division, or who I think will make the playoffs, it's why I said that toward the end of it, Washington, Pittsburgh is what it comes down to for me, and I'm leaving Pittsburgh out of that group because I think that the age is going to catch up with them this year. I think that you can't get off to a slow start. First of all, I think they might have some issues there, and then the age just catches up with you as you go along because then you're going to need every game you can get, and as you keep going, it's going to be a challenge to try to make that up while you have older guys who may not just be physically capable of keeping up with it, or maybe there's an injury that sets in because you're an older player and it just doesn't allow for you to get back into it. So it bodes well for teams. I mean, I believe I saw the Flyers average age is 26, having guys like Farabee and Patrick and Lindblom and, keep going down the list because there's a lot of them who are in their 20s like that, mid-20s, who can really use their motor at this point and keep going and be as energetic as possible. It'll bode well for teams like the Rangers as well, who have a lot of young players involved, and that's where the questions probably come in for the Pittsburghs and the Bostons and even Washington to an extent with Ovechkin, Oshie, guys like that who have been in the league for a long time. You got to wonder how their durability is going to be when you're playing so frequently and you're not playing any easy games in this division. So that's what it'll come down to, is how physically fit you are, and maybe being younger proves to be the better thing.
Yeah, I'm back here. Sorry for the little technical snafu. Kevin, we could keep you all night. I really appreciate you coming on. Do you want to take a swing at some predictions in terms of the Flyers at least, or maybe you want to go league-wide? I'll leave that up to you.
I can do either. I'm definitely watching around the league too, so if you guys want to hit me with them, go right ahead.
Okay. Let's go to the Central Division. So we've heard your picks for the East. You think it's the Bruins, the Flyers, the Islanders, and then a battle between the Capitals and the Penguins. And, well, this is an easy division for most people, but the Central Division with Tampa, Carolina, Dallas, Columbus, Nashville, Florida, Chicago, and lowly Detroit.
Yeah, I'll give you my top 4 for this one. I think at the top it's an easy pick. It's Tampa. I have Carolina in there. I have Columbus in there, and I have Dallas in there.
Okay. North Division, well, that's all Canadian teams. We have Toronto, Edmonton, Montreal, Calgary, Vancouver, Winnipeg, and lowly Ottawa.
This one gets interesting for me because I think that the division winner of this one is going to be Edmonton. I think they'll be the one who pulls ahead because, I mean, it's hard to argue with the 2 skilled players that they've got with McDavid and Draisaitl. I think that that's just going to be fun to watch throughout the year. I'll take Toronto in there. I have Montreal kind of taking a step forward because I think that they really impressed me in that playoff series against the Flyers, and I think that they're going to keep growing because they got a lot of good young players. And then for my 4th, I kind of go back and forth between Calgary and Vancouver. I do think that Ottawa is going to take some steps forward with some of the young players that they're adding, notably Tim Stützle. I don't have a lot of confidence in Winnipeg to be a team that's in contention, but I'll say that Calgary and Vancouver are kind of right there. I'll give the edge to Calgary for adding Jacob Markstrom because I think that's a huge addition for them.
Yeah, I was going to say that's an interesting division because as much as you like some of the skill on Vancouver, there's a little question with Holtby coming in to replace Markstrom because they think Demko is going to be the guy going forward, and they didn't want to commit to Markstrom blocking Demko, and then have another guy named DiPietro who's behind Demko if he strikes out, and they have one of the best goalie coaches in the entire league, in Ian Clark. So, yeah, that's a really interesting division. And then you got Winnipeg, like you said, they got some holes, but you have Connor Hellebuck. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting division. The West Division has Colorado, Vegas, St. Louis, Minnesota, Arizona, San Jose, Anaheim, and the LA Kings.
Three of them are easy. It's going to be Colorado's in there, St. Louis is in there, and Vegas is in there for sure. And then you got to pick one out of the remaining five that are there. I do expect LA to take some steps forward from where they were a year ago. It doesn't mean I'm picking them to make the playoffs, but I do think they'll be a better team this year. I really like Arizona out of this. I just think they're going to be that rough and tumble team that just finds a way to keep getting it done. I think Anaheim could take some steps forward. I think Minnesota's going the other direction. They're going south, I think. So I think it's probably between Anaheim and Arizona. I'll give the edge to Arizona, though.
Okay, great. So who do you expect to say being in the conference finals, if they're called the conference finals this year or not? I'm not sure. The semifinals they'll call them, and then the finals maybe a Final Four.
Yeah, so it's one from each division. So I'll give you Tampa from the Central. I think Colorado from the West, Edmonton from the North, and boy, looking at that East, it's tough. And because there's a part of me that sees the Flyers actually making it that far possibly. And I know that that's going to excite a lot of people, but it might come down to Flyers Bruins too in that case. So realistically, like I said, the battle in that division to me in the East is at the end is Washington Pittsburgh for that last playoff spot. They're not the team that I see being part of the conversation for the NHL's Final Four. It's going to be between Boston, the Flyers, and the New York Islanders. So it's one of those three. I really kind of do want to say the Flyers have a shot at this, because if they can stay healthy, if they can get the production from these other guys that we're talking about, from Lindblom and Patrick, and find a way to fill that void defensively that Niskanen left, that they can patch that up and make it look good. Even though, one of the things I was really impressed with too, that the Flyers talked about throughout when they added Eric Gustafsson and possibly with Shane Gostisbehere coming back, is that they think that they can actually make up for the defensive absence of Niskanen by playing in the offensive zone more. So maybe that's the formula to patching up the defense, is not letting the opposition get into your zone more often. And maybe that's the formula for success that this team needs, because they could go out there and maybe they go out there and they start scoring a lot more, and we're not even talking about the defensive holes after all this time. So I give them a fair shot at it. And if it's not them, then I think that it's probably Boston. Gotcha.
Wait, listen, if the defense is not the best, but you have a goaltender like a Rask or a Carter Hart or a Vasilevsky, I mean, you can get away with some things that normally other teams couldn't. So what do the Stanley Cup Finals look like, and who's your winner?
Wow. I know I'm trying not to get that far ahead typically in my mind, because it's going to feel so far off. I still think Tampa's the class of the Eastern Conference as we know it. It's going to be a little different this year, and quite frankly, it's hard to pick a Stanley Cup final looking at this, because it's going to be a little bit it's going to be structured differently than we know it. So it's not as easy to just look at the traditional Eastern Conference and say who's your winner. I'm going to kind of go off of that anyway, though, because I'll say Tampa's the one representative, maybe the Eastern Conference representative, if we will. And I really think Colorado is going to be the team that makes it out of the other one there. I think that those are the two teams that stand out to me the most. I'd love to be proven wrong and see the Flyers there, though. It would be great. So, but those are the two that I think. And I think that after, everybody through the playoffs last year, it was Tampa's year. I think this might be Colorado's year. I really like their team across the board, and maybe their goaltending has a little bit of a question mark, but I think if they can get that, they've got the defensive core, they've got the forwards. I think they're a ridiculously talented team.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Top to bottom, the only question is whether their goaltender can deliver or stay on the ice. That's the other challenge that he has. But wow, Kevin, I want to thank you so much for coming on. It's been such a pleasure to have you on. Where can people find you on social media?
Sure. So you guys can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Durso. I'll spell it out for you. It's Durso. And you can find all my other stuff. I'm writing over at 97.3 ESPN. So on Twitter, it's at 973 ESPN. Their stories are also at sportstalkphilly.com. And every week also you can hear me. I'm co-host of a podcast called the You Would Think podcast. So I share some thoughts there, and we're doing kind of some pre-game videos too that I'm going to try to set up as part of my game previews in my writing. So it should be a great way for everybody to kind of connect, and this way get some thoughts from me as we go into the games. And whenever I can be down there this year, I'm looking forward to it. And if not, I'm giving you the best I can from right here in my living room.
Well, take it from us. We're very impressed. We appreciate having you on.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
All right. You take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right. So that was Kevin Durso from 97.3 ESPN in South Jersey. So, gents, I guess if some of us want to make the commitment, if you just want to jump to where the Flyers are going to be, and if you want to just pick a cup winner, I'll leave it up to each one of you what you want to do. We're going to wrap this baby up, and then we're going to just tell people the upcoming schedule. So, Chef, I'm going to go to you. What do you think the Flyers are going to do in the division, and how far do you think they're going to go in the playoffs?
Boy, that's a tough one. I'm going to say they finish second or third in the division, and they go to the quarterfinals but lose. Okay. I'm going to say lose to Tampa. I see Tampa and the Golden Knights in the Cup.
Okay. Are you going to pick a winner there, or you want to wait for the trade deadline? Or?
Yeah, we'll wait on that. But I mean, if I had to make a call right now looking at it, I think it's going to be an awesome series either way, because looking at the teams that are going to qualify, I just think right now that if I'm going with my gut, I think it's Vegas and Tampa in 7 games.
Okay. Gotcha. Dan, turn it over to you.
So I think that I'm going to give a couple predictions here. I think that it seems like people just love picking kind of like the teams from last year. I don't think Tampa is. I don't know if they're going to be quite as good. I think it's going to be a strange season this year. I think the Flyers are going to come out of the gate really fast. I think the Flyers are going to win that division. I would actually go with Carolina in the other division in our conference, except for the fact that their goaltending is so bad. I think it's amazing they can't find a good goaltender. But we could have told them that Peter Mrazek was horrible a couple of years ago.
I know they don't want to pay him. That's what it is with Carolina.
It's unbelievable. But I mean, so I think you got to go with the Lightning by default. I think the Flyers are going to win the East. The West is really tough between the Avalanche and the Golden Knights, and the Blues. I think the Flyers are going to win the Cup. I actually bet on them to win the Cup. I think they're a good bet, good value to do so. So I'm going to go with the Flyers to win the Cup over the Blues. I think the Blues might get back there. And the one bet that I'll give out to the fans that I think is almost a mortal lock if the guy stays healthy is I really like Kirill Kaprizov of the Minnesota Wild to win the Calder Trophy. He's a 23-year-old. He led the KHL in goals last year, and he's going to be playing on the Wild's top line, also playing on their top power play unit. He's a really talented, really skilled player, and he's only the third choice in Calder betting on the websites and at the sports books. The favorite's Alexis Lafreniere, who's 18 years old. He's going to have some growing pains. He's playing on the Rangers' third line. And the second choice is Shesterkin from the Rangers. I think it's going to be really tough for a goalie to get enough games in to win the Calder Trophy. So that's my tidbit to some fans. Go to your sports book, go to your online sports book, and put some money on Kaprizov to win the Calder Trophy.
Now, Dan, what kind of odds did you get on the Flyers? Was it
17-1?
Oh, really? That's not bad. I was looking it up locally. It's 15-1. So I always at the beginning of the season, now the last 4 years, now I put some money down at the beginning of the season to start. That's my team. I back them, but whatever. But what you say professionally and what you want your heart to do are two different things.
Yeah. I mean, I made 3 bets this season. I'm not a big sports bettor, but I made 3 bets. I bet the Flyers to win the Cup. I bet Kaprizov to win the Calder at plus 450. Which means that for every $1 you bet, you profit $4.50. And then I bet Ilya Sorokin, the Islanders goalie. He was 27-1 to win the Calder Trophy. I think he's just as good as Shesterkin, who was 3-1. So I just put some money down on Sorokin because I thought he was a really good value. And actually, since I bet him at 27-1, he's now down to 17-1.
Yeah, no, that is a good bet.
I did make him pretty good. But so those are the only 3 ones. But I think Kaprizov is close to a lock if he stays healthy.
Yeah. Okay, let me just run with this here. I think the Flyers are going to finish 3rd in that division behind the Bruins, the Islanders, and I think the Capitals are going to find a way to get it done. In the Central, I like Tampa, Carolina, the Dallas Stars, and I think Columbus Blue Jackets are going to find a way to make it into the playoffs. North Division. Why is everybody so in love with Edmonton? Their goaltending is... when in doubt, go with the better goalie. That's what I say. But anyway, I'm going to go with Toronto, Montreal, Calgary, and Vancouver. And in the West, but it is a fairly easy division. You got the Avs, Vegas Golden Knights, go with the Blues. I like the Wild. I like the Wild to sneak in there. Not that I think they're going to do anything, but, you know. So anyway, the Stanley Cup final this year could be different. I mean, you could have teams that would traditionally be in the same conference playing each other like back in the old days.
Yeah.
When the Flyers were playing the Islanders in 1980. But this particular time, I am going to go with, I think Tampa is going to make it back. And I'm sorry to say this, but I really think the Avalanche are dynamite. I hate to go. I wanted to go and be a Maverick, but I think Tampa's going to win their 2nd cup in a row because the Avalanche's goaltending is not good enough. And ultimately, versus a team like Tampa, even though they've had to take some hits, I think that it's going to be good enough, and Vasilevsky will be the difference maker for the Tampa Bay Lightning winning back-to-back Stanley Cups. So
interesting. I think that you don't think that the Avalanche realizes that maybe if they're in that much of contention and they're doing that well, and a goalie would just set them over the top, that they don't make a deal to get a goalie at the trade deadline?
Yeah, but how do you do that? The only guy I could think of who could be available would be Georgiev for the Rangers. And is he really a starting goalie that you're going to win a cup with? I mean, there's a reason why Shesterkin immediately moves right out in front of him.
Yeah.
So, I would understand if a team like Carolina that has absolute dreck in goal. I'm sorry. They just do. And it's a damn shame because they're really one of the top 5 teams outside of the goaltender in the whole league. If you look at just the defense and the forwards, they're just stacked. They're fast. They play well. They got a great coach. And then it comes to the goaltender, and it's like bargain basement. That's just a joke. But
I also think Ottawa could be just annoying. Could be one of those annoying teams that doesn't know it's not supposed to be good this year.
Oh, yeah.
They've made some moves and all that. I just think of talking about they're in a classic position to be the overachieving team that everybody goes, holy crap, they came out of nowhere. And, then the following year they go back to normal.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible in a short schedule. Who knows? Like Dan was saying earlier about how the Buffalo Sabres were world beaters for half a season, and then, it's fold the tents and goodbye. Will this be the year? No. Remember the commercial? Will this be the year?
Yeah.
Nope. Not in Buffalo. Not with that goaltending. Not good enough. And the defense is nothing special, like Kevin was saying earlier. Okay. So just before we roll, just tomorrow night at the Wells Fargo Center, Pittsburgh, then again on Friday, and then Monday, Tuesday at the Wells Fargo Center, back-to-back versus Buffalo, and then on the road. They play Boston on the 21st. That is a Thursday. Again on the 23rd. That's a Saturday. And between some of these games, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about these games for the first time. We're going to talk about hockey in a long time, and we're really looking forward to it. Dan, where can people catch you on Twitter and social media?
So, on Twitter, they can follow me at dsilver88, the 88 for Eric Lindros. And, I do another podcast, Getting Bullied, which you can follow at Getting Bullied. Me and Mark Giannone do that every now and again, not on too much of a regular schedule, but check us out there. And then you can check out my prospects article out at philliesflyer.net.
Yeah, you can find out about skillets and bidets on this podcast as well. So there's a lot of culture there, and there's also a lot of other things. So it's check them out. Getting Bullied. Chef?
Yeah, you can find me. I'm hanging around Twitter, Chef to the Left B at Twitter. That's pretty much it for now. But some things are in the works, and you'll hear it soon. We might soon have another sponsor. We'll talk about that more in the future. So. All
right, looking forward to that. I'm Isaiah, ISAIAH _520. Isaiah, don't forget the _520 if you want to yell at me. And, of course, you can follow the O&B Puckcast at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck on Twitter. And we have a Facebook page. You can check it out, O&B Puckcast. And we're on so many different podcast platforms. And if you're on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. Hit that notification bell, because every time you do, and we come out with a new show, you will be informed. You can stay up with the O&B Puckcast. And if you could give us a 5-star rating and follow us and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, it moves us up the charts when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcasts. It helps us out. And, episode number 100 tonight. We hope you've enjoyed it. I'd like to thank people again for their listenership for these, I guess it's our 4th season we're into now. We really do appreciate it, and we want to thank Jamie Basco from FlyersNittyGritty.com for having us on board on the team this year. And with that, until next time, everybody, take care.